So Brittany Barnett's book, A Knock at Midnight, A Story of Hope, Justice, and Freedom, was chosen for our 2023 list under the category of Leadership Development. And we are so privileged to have Brittany with us tonight as our speaker. So allow me to introduce her. Brittany K. Barnett is an attorney, author, and entrepreneur. Her memoir, A Knock at Midnight, was published by the Crown Publishing Group, a division of Penguin Random House. She's a graduate of SMU's Dedman School of Law. She previously served as the Associate General Counsel at Oryx USA Corporation, focusing on mergers and acquisitions and general corporate matters. Prior to her legal career, Brittany earned her license as a certified public accountant and worked for international accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP. She holds bachelor's and master's degree in accounting. As the daughter of a formerly incarcerated mother, Brittany knows firsthand the impact of mass incarceration is far-reaching, devastating families and entire communities. Dedicated to transforming the criminal justice system, Brittany has founded 2 nonprofits to carry out her life's work. The Buried Alive Project, which works to dismantle life without parole sentences handed down under federal drug laws, and Girls Embracing Mothers, dedicated to empowering girls with mothers in prison. Brittany, welcome, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.
We are so delighted to have you here. Thank you again. We so appreciate your work, your profound work in A Knock at Midnight, and also the work that you do with Girls Embracing Mothers, which we are very proud and honored to be able to support. For those who haven't read the book yet, let's begin there. Who is Sharonda and what is her story about?
Yes, Sharonda. She's such a person near and dear to my heart. Like myself, Sharonda is a Black daughter of the rural South. She grew up in a small town of Terrell, Texas, in East Texas. And when I came across her case, as a law student, actually, I never like to say by coincidence. It was all part of a divine plan. I was researching for a paper for critical race theory course I was taking in law school, and I wanted to humanize my paper. As was mentioned in my bio, my own mother had been incarcerated. And so I knew just how devastating mass incarceration was to entire families. And I also knew that it is devastating for any loved one to go to prison, but it is a primal wound, truly, when it's your mom. And so I sent Sharonda a letter. I told her I was a law student, that I knew next to nothing about criminal law, but that I wanted to help her get out of prison. And to show more about who Sharonda is, she sends me this short letter back in her gorgeous penmanship, and she wished me well in my studies, but it was kind of like, yeah, right. You're a law student. How are you going to get me out of here? So many lawyers have promised that. And so I kept writing her, and I went to meet her in prison. And that's when I got to know her very well. So I was still a law student, so I couldn't get an official attorney-client visit. So I had to visit her through the normal visitation procedures. And I was nervous. And I didn't know what to expect. I never met anyone with a life without parole sentence. I mean, she's fundamentally set to die in prison, and I didn't know what to expect from her. And so I remember sitting just nervously waiting in the prison visitation room, kind of observing all the women and their visitors around me. And here comes Sharonda Jones. And what I got was a woman whose smile lit up the room. What I got whose energy was clearly contagious to all the women around her in such a positive way. And, we talked maybe 10 minutes about her case during that first visit. And the rest of the several hours I was there was just like speaking to family. I saw so much of myself in her, and she's truly a delight, even in the face of adversity that would be unbearable for many people.
She was also impacted by enhanced sentencing. You can tell us later in your story. And for those of us who haven't been to law school and aren't familiar, what is enhanced sentencing and what impact does it have on people who go to trial?
Yeah, it was something I had no idea about either. And as I mentioned, I took a critical race theory course in law school. And these courses are where you analyze the intersection between race and the law. And I was writing my paper about this disparity in sentencing I learned about between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. And what I learned was in 1986, Congress passed the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act that not only implemented and ushered in mandatory minimum sentencing, but it also brought in this disparity in sentencing between powder cocaine and crack cocaine, whereas one person could have 500 grams of powder cocaine, I could only have 5 grams of crack cocaine, and we will receive the same sentence in prison. Now, it's not lost on anyone today, and especially in the late 80s, that more affluent white people were using powder cocaine and crack cocaine was running rampant through communities of color, in particular Black communities. And what this 100-to-1 sentencing disparity did was it created this hugely disproportionate number of Black and brown people in federal prison for drug offenses. Whereas even today, over 80% of the people in federal prison for drug offenses are people of color. Years later, started to be a lot of outrage, if you will, from members of Congress, from even people on the Sentencing Commission, even Supreme Court judges, speaking out about this extremely harsh disparity in sentencing, and to really drive it home in Sharonda Jones's case. Sharonda Jones, and none of my clients are innocent by any means. Our argument here is that their punishment far exceeded the crime. And Sharonda, on a handful of occasions, she drove drugs between 2 suppliers from Dallas to Houston. And in her case, on a handful of occasions of transporting these drugs, got caught up in this larger federal drug conspiracy. Where even in her case, the drug supplier who admitted to trafficking hundreds of kilograms of powder cocaine testified against Sharonda in her trial. He received an 18-year sentence. She received a life sentence, in large part because she utilized her constitutional right to go to trial. And prosecutors hand out what we call in the legal world trial penalties for people that utilize their constitutional right. But in Sharonda's case, it was testified that on those handful of occasions, she drove for 2 drug suppliers, powder cocaine. But the judge found, and prosecutors argued, that Sharonda knew, or she should have known, that the powder cocaine was going to be ultimately cooked up into crack cocaine. And she was sentenced under the harsher crack cocaine penalties. And in Sharonda's case and in many others, this was a decision of life or death.
You are a lawyer, you're a skilled advocate professionally. And as you shared earlier, you come to this work in part through your own personal experience, through your own family story, your heart story, the primal wound, as you talk about, of maternal incarceration. So tell us a bit more about your own journey, if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up, as I mentioned, like Sharonda, in rural East Texas. We had a very loving, extended family. I grew up initially in a small town of about 150 people. And anyone from rural towns may know, many of the times in a small town like that, and in my case in particular, there was like a 2-mile stretch of road and about 40 people living on this road, and everybody was family. Everybody was family there. And so that's how I grew up. My mom and dad were teenage parents. My mom was very loving. My sister and I, who's 1.5 years younger than me, she put herself through nursing school and was just really doing what I'm understanding now. She was doing the best she knew how to do. And unfortunately, my mother developed an addiction to drugs that became much stronger than she was over time, and that led to her incarceration. My mother had never been in trouble before. She was arrested on an assault case and given 5 years probation. But because my mother suffered from addiction, she was not able to comply with her terms of release. She never committed any new crime that violated her probation, but she was continuously failing her drug tests that were a part of her probation. And there was a violation once, and her probation was extended to 7 years. And then there was another violation, and it was extended to 10. And then there was another violation, and it was straight to prison. You go, and so it was always mind blowing to me with living through that and not understanding how our judicial system, or even my mom's probation officer, never stopped to think this woman has a drug addiction, and how in those situations is prison the answer over some type of rehabilitation program. But, then in the 2000s, there were no alternative courts in rural East Texas. There's not many now, and so instead my mother was sent to prison. And as I mentioned before, it was devastating. I was a young adult. I was 22 years old at the time. But even as a young adult, my life was greatly impacted. My sister's life was greatly impacted. My mother, even through her addiction, was always present, in our lives and present for the big stuff. And she was not there the year I graduated from graduate school. And it was because she couldn't be there. She was in a prison cell, and that was just horrible. It was a horrible, horrible experience for us, and having dealt with my mother's addiction as young as I can remember, of age 10, and growing up in the 90s at the height of the war on drugs and the Just Say No programs and the DARE programs. It's kind of being in these situations as a preteen, and thinking that, wow, the people who fall victim to addiction are among the weakest links, the most morally corrupt. And I'm having to reconcile that in my young mind with the disaster unfolding. My tiny arms reach away within my mom. And it was a lot emotionally for me, even as a child, and all that, being compounded to her imprisonment. It was a lot. And I remember visiting my mom for the first time. And when she was in the county jail, I don't know, many of you may have visited loved ones or friends in prison through the county jail. And there's this glass and plexiglass and the phone. You have to visit through the glass, we call it. And my mom had been in the jail for several months before prison, and I just couldn't wait to get to that prison because I knew per the instructions that we would get a contact visit. And I couldn't wait to hug my mama, Emily. I couldn't wait to touch her, to smell her. And I got there. I drove 2.5 hours to the prison, and I could not have a contact visit because they said she had not been at the prison 60 days yet. And I didn't even know that was a requirement. And so I had to visit my mom through the glass again. And I'll never forget that visit because we cried and we laughed and we cried and we laughed some more to keep from crying even more, and I just remember that 3-inch plexiglass being such a barrier to our maternal bond, and I'll just never forget pressing that phone so tight to my ear because I didn't want to miss the sound of my mama's voice. And more heartfelt for me during that time was seeing a tiny lip print on the scratched plexiglass and realizing that this was some younger child who tried to reach their mother, before my visit. And in that moment, I truly understood the why. And that is when Girls Embracing Mothers was born. I launched the organization. We celebrate 10 years this year. And I cannot thank, United Women in Faith enough for the generosity. We've never received generosity like that in a decade, and this is really helping us scale our program and build our infrastructure and serve more women and girls. And we're even going into Mississippi this year with our programs. Through our just incredible partnership with Texas Women's Prisons, we take girls to visit their moms in prison every single month. And unlike my first visit with my mom, those girls get contact visits. They can hug their moms, touch their moms. And it's just the most beautiful thing. And I find joy in that, that something so traumatic for my family could birth something where we could really work to center healing justice for women and girls.
Such a gift. You talk really powerfully in chapter 10, you use this line that, you finally launched, and it's at Gainesville, and it's the very prison in which my mother and I had pressed our palms together through that hateful plexiglass, right? So just that incredible story of return, right? And return with mission, and return with ministry, and return to make a real transformation with GEM. So I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about GEM, how it got started, but also what you're looking forward to in this next chapter in GEM's work and the Mississippi expansion.
Absolutely. The GEM is definitely my baby. We went with GEM and the logo of a diamond because I want our girls to know that they are gems, they are diamonds. And in order for a diamond to brilliantly shine, it must go through intense heat and crushing pressure. But this process releases the beauty of a diamond that we all admire, a beauty that is unbreakable. And we truly center that in our core. Girls Embracing Mothers, we work to empower young girls with mothers in prison to break the cycle of incarceration and lead successful lives with vision and purpose. We do that through our Pearl and Diamond programs. Our Pearl program is where we partner with Texas Women's Prisons. We get to take the girls to visit their moms in prison every second Saturday of the month. I'm so happy that we've been able to resume our visits this past November since the COVID outbreak, but we go in and the prison gives us 4 hours to visit with the moms, as opposed to the normal 2 hours they give. They let us be in an education building to ourselves. We get to bring in food, eat lunch with the moms. We always do some form of art therapy. There was even a women's group from United Women in Faith that reached out to us that is sending knitting kits for the moms to be able to knit. So we can't wait to do that project. And then we always cover a curriculum that revolves around critical life issues and truly centers what we call healing justice through this 2-generational model, working simultaneously with the women and girls to help reduce the trauma associated with maternal incarceration. And so through that program, that's our flagship. That's what we're looking to expand to the women's prisons in Mississippi. For many of you who may not know, women are the fastest growing incarcerated population. Many of the women are mothers. In fact, 80% of the women in Texas prisons are mothers. And what we found is that Texas incarcerates more women by sheer number than any other state in the country. Texas has around 12 women's prisons in the state. In fact, we go to Gatesville to take the girls to visit their moms, and there are 5 women's prisons in the small town of Gatesville alone. And so we meet at one unit, and the prisons bus the moms over from the other units for our program. But to put it in context, Mississippi incarcerates roughly 800 women, and they have 1 prison. But I'm from rural East Texas, and something just pulls at my heart about the South. I just feel like the South gets overlooked a lot. And our issues, they're the same, but they may show up different. And so we chose Mississippi as one of our key states because of the rural areas and to be able to provide transportation and these enhanced visits. We're also looking at Arkansas as well, who quite surprisingly to me incarcerates a lot of women per capita, more than I would expect. And so our other Diamond program through Girls Embracing Mothers, it's a series of empowerment workshops for the girls, including an annual summer camp. We will have our 6th annual summer camp this summer. We cannot wait. We also have an annual Amplify Her event, bringing together women and girls who've been impacted by the system and their guardians so that we can convene together for a day of fun, motivational speakers, but also serious breakout sessions to promote solutions, but promoting these solutions by listening to the people that we serve, ensuring that directly impacted women and girls are at the center of our work. Our staff, we are fully staffed by directly impacted women and girls. Angelica Zaragoza is our senior program director, and she was in prison in our Pearl program for a couple of years, and we would take her daughter to visit her. So that is very important to us, to center those lived experiences and to really empower their expertise along the way. But we are just really grateful for the journey, for sure. We're looking forward to this year to celebrate 10. We will be having Amplify Her event to celebrate our 10th year in October this year, and working with other organizations across the South as well to have their own Amplify Her activations in partnership with us. So we're looking forward to really growing, and we really work to scale our impact through deep, intentional scaling versus, oh, let's serve 10,000 women and girls tomorrow. It would be impossible infrastructurally for us to do that, but it also would really take away from the quality of services we provide, given our budget. And so we were really looking forward to going deep and intentional in the South.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciate, and I have learned so much from your work and from Jem's work in really centering the voices of women and girls, right? Because so much of this conversation around mass incarceration is a conversation about men, and we've missed out on the particular and specific experiences of women and of girls. But I want to pick up on something else you shared, which is this emphasis and this call also really to the rural South, right? And that specific community. And you say in your book, you write, reflecting on your own experience growing up, saying, quote, "We were a rural Black family in East Texas where the arm of the law had quickly replaced the slave owner shackles as a method of social and economic control of its Black population." So what should readers and members know about how incarceration impacts rural Black communities and how this connects to a deeper history in the region and in the country?
Yeah, you know, one of my heroes is Bryan Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, an incredible book I highly recommend as well. He's an amazing attorney, but he talks about this reconciliation, you know, that needs to happen. In order for it to happen, we have to look at our past and acknowledge the injustice and the racial injustice that bleeds through the criminal legal system. And in rural East Texas, where I'm from, for example, I mean, there are still Confederate soldier statues in the town square. You know, there are still marijuana cases for $10 worth of marijuana where you could see a defendant get 25 years in prison, and seeing this and understanding our sordid racial history and past, especially in the South, you truly see this evolution of slavery into mass incarceration, as Bryan Stevenson speaks on, but you see it in real life and how it's affecting real people. I mentioned the 25 years for, you know, $10 worth of marijuana. My mother received 8 years. And I think sometimes, Emily, we as a society become desensitized to time. And we throw around these sentences like 10 years and 15 years, like we're talking about $10 and $15, but that is a long time. And my mother, for an 8-year sentence, she served 2.5 years, and it felt like forever. It felt like forever. So I think of Sharonda's case and other cases I represented, people serving life, and life without parole is forever. You know, and people like Sharonda, they're serving the same amount of time in prison as the Unabomber, with a stark difference in crimes. And it's fascinating too that you read that sentence, because I was alerted right before the holidays that my book has been banned in every single state prison in the state of Florida. And when the person in prison sent my team the letter he received as to why my book was being banned and he couldn't receive it, they quoted that sentence. And they said, this could incite a riot, and it's a safety hazard for the prison. And I'm like, no, my book gives hope. I mean, I get hundreds of letters across the country from people in prison where my book is giving hope. And I'm saying, wow, we as a society have prison systems that literally want to strip hope, when hope is all that they have. And so it is something that definitely ties to the soil in the South, and we still see show up today.
Thank you so much. A Knock at Midnight by Brittany K. Barnett. If you have not read it yet, go out and get it. Read it this week, read it this weekend, or at least begin to dive in and continue to learn and to be inspired into action.